Okay, welcome to the next exciting installment of resource management, and this is green design. So, just this is the definition from the glossary of terms. So, we're looking at designing that takes into account the environmental impact and product throughout its life. Okay, it's actually very similar to some other topics that we've covered in the past. Go ahead and watch this video. It's a pretty short video that will go through some of the ideas about green design. Okay, so um, objectives for green design. So this is important. There's kind of a long list of this, so sorry about that. But the objectives of green design. So what we're looking at is increasing efficiency in materials, energy, and resources. So increasing efficiency means that basically you're using the materials and energy and other resources more efficiently. So using less of them, making them go farther, using them in ways that are um, you know there's less waste involved, right? The opposite of efficiency is waste. So we're looking at decreasing waste and making sure that we use more of the energy, more of the materials, and so that we have less waste. Another objective is minimizing pollution. Okay, so we're looking at trying to use different materials that are less polluting. So those are ones that use less energy in their creations. Those are ones that are easier to compost or um, that will be recycled easier. Those kinds of ideas, right? So we're looking for less pollution from the materials that we choose. So this would be, for instance, let's say that you're picking a plastic, it would be trying to pick something like PLA as opposed to something like ABS. So ABS is not it's recyclable, but it's not compostable, whereas PLA is made out of corn, and so it's actually a greener alternative, and it would be something that you could compost. Okay, so that's just an example of that. All right, we're looking another objective for green design is reducing the long-term harm of a product. So, there are when you are basically throughout a product's life cycle, there's going to be harm that's done, and what we want to do is just make sure that long-term harm is not something that lasts long. This is the example here in this picture. This is a river, and basically what you're looking at is leaching metals and chemicals and things like that from mine tailings. So mine tailings are basically the leftover bits of ore um, when you're you know when you're done mining, and they can be full of toxic metals that can leach into rivers and things like that, and that can cause some really long-term harm because this kind of problem is going to last for years and years and years, and there are many examples of this kind of thing happening, where you'll have long-term harm. My mom actually used to work for an environmental company, and one of the cleanup jobs that environmental company was working on was in San Francisco. It was at an airport, and they had a degreasing agent that they used, and that leaked into the water table. And trying to remove that degreasing agent, which causes cancer and all kinds of nasty things from the water table, was incredibly difficult. So, that's a long-term harm, and you want to try to reduce that as much as possible. Okay, we're looking at ensuring that the planned life of a product is appropriate in environmental terms and it will function efficiently for its full life. So we're looking at trying to make products that will last for the long term, or at least appropriate to their life, as opposed to short term. I mean, there's no better example to me than single-use plastic bags, right? So that's a very short-term solution. They say that the average length of time that a plastic bag is used is 12 minutes. And so you're causing, an immense amount of environmental harm for a very short-term benefit. So, using those single-use plastic bags is not good. Much better to use, cloth bags that you buy and use over and over and over again. That's going to have a longer term environmental impact. Now, I know that there's some argument that these you know, cloth bags that people buy, they're actually cause more pollution. And it depends on use. Of course, the consumer must use them in an appropriate way also. So that would be an important part of trying to educate consumers, saying like, you don't want to be buying new bags every time, new cloth bags every time you go shopping. That is, of course, a waste. And what you'd want to do is make sure that you bring the cloth bags you already have to the store, and that over I think it's like if you use them like 15, 20 times, I forget what the number is, then you've made up the you're actually having a positive environmental impact. Okay, you want to take full account of the effects and end of disposal of the product. So, this is something that we are absolutely terrible at as a species. We don't take into account all of the end of life of things. So yeah, they look pretty in the store, but when you're done with them, they just end up going into landfill. If they're disposed of correctly, they might get recycled. But quite often they don't. So a lot of, for instance, a lot of plastic and stuff ends up in the ocean, and it accumulates. And this is just an example of that. Um, that has a huge environmental impact, and we want to be considering that as we're designing. How can we reduce the impact of the end of life of a product? Okay, its effects on the disposal of the product. Can they be recycled? Can they be composted? Can they be, you know, um, minimizing the packaging, minimizing the product? There's lots of ways that we can affect that. Okay, so yep, here's another sort of example of that is packaging. Um, so encourage efficient and environmentally friendly packaging. So this is a polystyrene cup. It'll be around for the next 500 years. Okay, probably going to break up into little teeny pieces, but it'll be around for a long time. And this is just not very environmentally friendly. It'd be better if it was a paper cup or something that would break down relatively quickly. And this is a kid collecting trash in somewhere around the world, but basically he's collecting trash so that he can recycle it. So a lot of this garbage ends up in the ocean. We need to take into account our packaging. So packaging is a very important idea in green design. Okay, so we want to minimize noise and smell. So, a lot of industrial processes have some terrible smells that are involved with them, and you want to reduce that odor because you don't want to live next to something that's very stinky. Those days when you can smell the refinery up in Rawbig, that's something that makes our lives not as good. You walk outside and you're like, ooh, it smells today. Well, that's something that should be abated. Okay, noise reduction is also important. Okay, if you're next to an industrial plant that's producing a product that is noisy, well, that's going to have an effect on you and your um, and on wildlife and the environment, right? Like, if you have a very noisy place, well, birds and animals are not going to want to be near there. That affects their habitat. Okay, we want to reduce safety hazards, right? So we want to kind of follow this pyramid, right? So we want to eliminate hasty, safety hazards as much as possible. So they should be eliminated as much as possible. If better, well, worse than that, you could substitute so that you have something that is, you know, less unsafe. You can isolate it, so that means make sure that the safety issue is contained somewhere. This is like putting tape on, like we do in the wood lab, where we put tape on the floor so that you don't walk into a place where you can actually hurt yourself. Okay, you could have controls in there that would help to minimize safety hazard. These are like our buttons, those big red buttons that are on some of the woodworking equipment that you kick that when if there's a problem. Um, there's administrative controls, right? So that would be like us saying, hey, make sure that you don't go into this space. We're administrating the controls. And then there's personal protective equipment. So this is like, for instance, wearing the safety goggles in the wood lab. Better, like for instance, there's like a table saw. It's a really interesting table saw, but it senses if something organic touches the blade, and it will instantly stop the blade. I'll have to maybe put a video on that. It's very interesting. Like that would eliminate the safety issue of cutting yourself on the table saw. So, that would be our most preferred. We don't have that, right? So we haven't substituted. We've isolated the table saw, so nobody should go in that area. We have controls on it, like for instance, we have those guards and things like that that will help to protect that. We say you can't use the table saw unless you're being supervised, and then you have to wear things like safety goggles and stuff like that to use our table saw. Okay, so we want to try to minimize the different materials in a product, and this is important because fewer materials mean that it's easier to recycle. The issue with recycling is that you have to actually take and separate the materials that are in there. This is part of the reason that electronic recycling is so difficult because there's so many different little teeny materials in them, and they are glued together in such a way that it's very difficult to take them apart. So, if we can minimize the different kinds of materials that are in a product, so have fewer materials, it makes those products better and easier to recycle. Labeling, okay, so we want to make sure that they're labeled so that products are labeled so that they're easy to recycle. And again, this comes with separating. You can't basically recycle this PET. This one right here, polyethylene triphthalate, you can't recycle that with PVC, right? Those two have to be separated. So this is an important part of recycling. Recycling efforts really try to make sure that they separate out the different plastics, and they can be recycled differently. Okay, so those are interesting like labels that need to be put onto our products so that we know what can be recycled and how to separate them. Okay, all right. So usually green design, it involves trying to incorporate one or two of these objectives that we just talked about. So here's an example. So this is, if you watch this, this is the Coca-Cola company, and basically what they're working towards is a world without waste. So you can click on this website to see where I got this video, and then please just watch this video. Okay, so now, what causes green design? So we're looking at the drivers of green design. So what makes green design happen? So first off is something like consumer pressure. So this is you need to write this down because this is a definition from the glossary of terms. So this is individuals who want to take action to promote a positive change and meet their goals, right? So for instance, this is about fair trade chocolate, right? And so this is a consumer group. So this is Green America. It's a consumer group, and basically what they're doing is grading the different types of chocolate, different brands of chocolate for their sort of fair trade quality. Okay, and you can kind of read about these things, but that's a consumer pressure. Okay, then you've got environmental legislation. So this is the government saying, hey, you will do something to fix these issues. Okay, so for instance, in Europe they have the take back programs. So basically, like in Europe, um, producers of products must be able to take back their products. Okay, so how do you do that? Well, in this case, Sony set up a take back recycling program. There's also some green legislation, so laws and regulations that are based on conservation and sustainable principles, following design and manufacturing when creating green products. I know this is not exactly about a green product, but just kind of the idea of environmental legislation. So, for instance, now in a lot of countries, when they build roads, what they've noticed is that the roads act as a barrier to species. So, it's dangerous for basically I don't know, like a bear or something that lives on this side of the road to cross to this side of the road, and that acts as a barrier to their genetic diversity, and it actually over time will cause them to go extinct. So what a lot of countries are starting to do now is they create these wildlife overpasses so that basically the wildlife can get over a road, and be able to get from this side to that side. Now, if I was a predator, I would like stick myself like right here or something like that, or up here. But anyhow, so deer or bears or anything can cross over this, and that helps to increase genetic diversity. So that's an example of green legislation. Okay, so there's a couple ways the designer's role here, and there's a couple ways that green design can happen. So, um, our role as designers is to, you know, is to use and dispose of products that can be modified by designers through careful consideration on the design stage. So basically what we're trying to do is keep in mind the environmental impact of our products, its production, so the making of it, the use of it, and the disposal of it, so that it can be more environmentally friendly. Okay, and there's two ways that this can be done. We can do an incremental change where we're proving incremental means like, small bits, small bits, small bits. So products are improved and developed over time, um, leading to new versions and new generations. Okay, whereas there's radical change where a completely new product is devised, going back to the roots of the problem and thinking about the solution in a different way. So these are two different ways. This is sort of evolution, not revolution. This is revolution, not evolution. Okay, so incremental change, what we're looking at is small changes over time, changes to materials, using more recycled or recyclable materials, avoiding composite materials. So composite means that you're kind of sticking together two or more materials. Okay, and usually those are very difficult or expensive, or they just can't be recycled, right? If you have something that's glued together, this again comes back to like electronic components. They are composite materials, and they're very difficult or expensive to recycle, and they just, mostly don't. They end up in landfill, or there's some really terrible, in less economically developed countries, there's some really terrible examples of people trying to recycle these by burning them, and it's awful. Um, you want to limit the number of materials, right? So like a Tetra Pak has multi-layers and it's difficult to recycle, right? They've got sort of a plastic layer on the very inside, and then they've got a cardboard layer, and then they've got another layer, and then another layer, and that makes them very difficult to recycle. Um, we want to try to use those clean technologies that we talked about before um, in our in our making of things. So as much as possible in manufacturing techniques using clean technology. And then we want to have disassembly. We want to make things easier to disassemble because that makes them easier to recycle. Okay, if you're changing radically, this is where you're going to make big changes to a design of a product or a service. This is a complete overhaul of manufacturing process, and then using radical clean technology systems. Now, generally, this is not going to happen, right? I can't even think of an example of where you'd have a radical change to a product. But basically, if you are doing a radical change, you're changing something just overnight. Boom, it's completely changed, and that's um, that doesn't happen very often. Most change is incremental. Okay, so we're going to look at some principles of environmental law. So we have a couple of principles. We have the prevention principle, okay, and this basically is what it is, right? Like you're preventing. So you're avoiding or minimizing the production of waste in the production, use, and disposal, right? So all across its life cycle, from the time it's made to the time it's used to the time it's disposed of, okay? And the idea here is that you're taking actions before damage occurs. Okay, so you're preventing damage before it occurs. And it's usually based on a past catastrophe or prior scientific data and research, right? So they go, oh my gosh, look what happened in the past. We're going to change that. It could be something like, lead paint. In the past, people used to use lead in their paint a lot because it allowed you to make a very nice white paint. Um, but we know now that lead has a really huge impact on people's um, uh, kind of development, mental development. So it's really terrible to use. So there was a catastrophic amount of lead in the environment, and that caused people to just completely change. And now it's illegal to use lead paint. So you're preventing the production, okay, of those terrible things. Okay, precautionary. So this is sort of, where you are anticipating potential problems in relation. So you're kind of looking forward and saying, what could be the problems with this, right? So in relation to environment, and again, we're looking at production, use, and disposal. So this action should be taken so that risk of damage is avoided. So it's really a risk analysis. You're kind of looking at something and saying, okay, well, how could I avoid or make sure that there is no damage? Okay, there may be an uncertainty, so scientific evidence, but perhaps not conclusive about the risk of environmental harm. There's some interesting reports coming out about like Teflon being a problem. There's some chemicals that are in Teflon that they call the forever chemical. I forget the name of them right now, but they are, very long lasting chemicals, and they can do harm and build up in people's bodies and things like that. And so, this came about relatively recently. So, and the evidence is there, but not, as conclusive, and you still find Teflon pans. So this allows protective measures to be taken without having to waste until damage materializes. So you can look forward and say, actually, let's try to, let's be careful about this. Let's try not to have any damage. Sorry, excuse me. For example, we know that air pollution causes respiratory illness, but how much air pollution is acceptable, right? So we would look at that, try to analyze the risk. Is a little air pollution okay, or should we cut it out completely? All right, that's it, guys. Have a good day.